Darien and the Dryland Band reunited with Sarah not far from the Isle of Dragonstone. Dreamfire seemed compliant. There was a sense of awe and fear among the band. None of them had been so close to the Targaryen beasts. Surely the dragon would give Sarah the might she needed to return her daughter Jenna to her. Yet the Thens could still muster many, and right now the Dryland Band had not only few swords, but few provisions by which to feed them. The hunger of a dragon is quite something else, too. For the moment, the band had hidden themselves away in Haywood, in the hold known as Grey Chamber. They were still dangerously close to the Iron Throne, and news of Dreamfire's flight had surely reached many an ear. Darien, Sarah, and the band would need to hold trust in one another, that no bounties or warrants would be honored, no matter how tempting the price. The band was confident that the woods would shield them from the eyes of the Highborn for now. Their additional supplies and equipment would be safe here, yet they would not be for long. Poaching and stealing from nearby settlements would be noticed before long. No, the band needed coin, and they needed it now. And after pulling a number of strings, Eldario had uncovered 2 contracts that could earn the band what they need: distance and coin. An emissary of Sir Morale needed protection from bandits and accidents. Darien's name did not need to be known to the Lord. They were caravan guards, nothing more, nothing less. The contract was taken. A delegation from Sir Morale sauntered through the flaps of Darien's tent. "Greetings, adventurer," spoke an envoy. "Many are the roads of this world, and treacherous. If you work for the scales, my liege would pay well for your expertise. I, Daron, am a most loyal servant of the Sir. It is his words I must carry to Castle Driftmark, the hall of Lord Daemon. Guide me, protect me, and entrust my missive does not fall prey to prying eyes." It was a dangerous prospect. Driftmark was well known to them. The city had once housed the band for a time, yet they would not need to stay alone. They could travel swiftly, and they would, leaving the camp and the dragon behind. It was to be a short trip, taking no longer than 15 days, and so they set off, leaving the dangerous Drake behind, in the care of Sarah, along with Darien's young son. 2 others would remain to guard the camp: Reynard and Cyrene, Darien's most trusted. There were none better suited to the task, wishing them all well, and Sarah begging them safe travel. The band left, sailing across the gullet, with the emissary of Sir Morale safely guarded. And with little trouble, they arrived in the great hall of Driftmark. Darien did his best to obscure his lightness. Thankfully, the Lord of the Driftwood Throne had more important matters to attend to. Yet Darien's name was still noted. The young knight recognized, despite his caution. The sooner they left Driftmark, the better. The band had exceeded the expectations of their duty, and had been paid well for their proficiency, a reason why, perhaps, that Darien had been given a head start. Yet on their journey back across the gullet, Darien was stirred from what had been a relaxing trip thus far. A sudden shriek. Sprinting into the stores below deck, he was horrified to find a seagull beside the shredded remains of what little supplies remained, its feathers stretched thin against its foul, bloated belly. In his rage, Darien could have killed the repugnant winged menace right there, but he was stopped by his sea captain, Harley. "Ark, stay your hand, you floppish knave. You not know it's bad luck to kill a bird at sea." There was little that would stop Darien right now, and Harley was not he. Thankfully, superstitions were abated, and before they knew it, the band was reunited in Grey Chamber. For nearly their entire supply of coin, Darien was able to secure the provisions they would need to see them most of the way to the north. Once again, Caravan Master Eldario plotted a course that would take them up along the eastern coast of Westeros, a journey that would terminate in Hardhome beyond the wall. They had enough provisions, and with another experienced captain, their journey should go smoothly. Their captain this time was a low-born woman named Eldasi, a local of Crackclaw Point, and a woman that was rather taken with the tale of Sarah and Darian. Even more so by the sight of the dragon that accompanied them in the skies above her vessel. Not a normal adventure, not even for an experienced captain of Crackclaw. She had certainly seen the beasts of Dragonstone far across the gullet, but to have one trace the skies ahead of her, that was a different experience altogether. And so it was that the band left Haywood behind, hoping that out here on the sea, they would be free from their pursuers, but the long shadow of the Iron Throne would not fall upon them out here. Darian's band was slowly becoming more accustomed to life at sea. This voyage alone was to take them 3 months, spending so much time together. There were certainly tensions, personalities that grated against one another. Yet, out of that friction came something good. The young warrior that once challenged Darian to combat, Ronnet, had seemingly fallen for the cutpurse Jonquil. There, under the sails, amongst the salt, they spoke vows to one another, joining in a marriage on the high seas. And spirits were high as they approached Widow's Watch, Dreamfire soaring lazily high above. It was then Darian drifted into a dream. There were banquet tables extending far, a high throne that gleamed with rubies and sapphires. Guests from the 4 corners of the world celebrated Darian's 20 years of blessed reign. Another cup of sweet ambrosia, glorious emperor. Supreme Archsteward Cyrene asked, offering a splendid goblet. Darian quaffed from it eagerly. Dance for me, fool, the old knight bellowed at the disgraced and humbled torment. Such was the fate of those who crossed Darien dryland. He closed his eyes for just a moment, but then, upon opening them again, he found himself upon the deck of that ship, the great dragon Dreamfire's shadow passing over him. It was a dream, yes, but perhaps it was one that could become a reality. They were close to Carhold now, and the grey cliffs, yet they would not rest this time. They could not afford to. Every port, every castle, every town was a danger to them. Unbeknownst to Darian and Sarah, the agents of the Iron Throne had already started their search far and wide. Rumors of Dreamfire's flight along the eastern coast saw the ordered closure of ports. Small folk from Crackclaw to the Fingers reported what they had seen. A single ship and a dragon high in the sky. They were not free. Not yet. But as the band reached the Straits of Skagos, the sea was calm, nearly as kind as it had been after the birth of Darian's son. It was to be an easy day for the ship's crew. But then Darian spotted it. A mangled corpse of a ship buried nose first into some jagged rocks just ahead. There did not appear to be any survivors, and the rocks would be no trivial thing to navigate. Yet Darian felt compelled to go and investigate this mysterious wreck, and so he would. Much to Darian's surprise, he began to hear a voice hailing his ship as they approached the wreckage. The woman appeared to be a wealthy noble, floating around on the remains of a door. "Hail! I never thought I was to see another soul again before the sea would claim me as it did my companions." She introduced herself as Karina, claiming to be a noble from the lordship of Rum Persik, and had offered to pay for safe passage and company. This Karina was one that Darian had worked for in the past, a Skagosi that he would gladly help to shore. With a little coin now in their pocket, it was time for that final push. Yet as the band sailed farther north, and as the frigid winds caressed them, something was wrong. There were many times along their journey they needed to slow, to allow Dreamfire to recover. Dragons were mighty beasts, yet they were still mortal creatures. When the seas were calm, they moored for a time, allowing the shimmering dragon to rest and recover. Yet now Dreamfire seemed to protest. Any outcropping of rock she could find, any hunk of ice, she would land and call to Sarah. It was a shrill sound, almost as though the great thing was in pain. Yet Sarah was adamant. There was no turning back. Jenna remained here, and Dreamfire was the key to her return. Mounting the great creature, Sarah pushed Dreamfire onwards. The further north and east they flew, the calmer the dragon seemed. With Sarah soothing her, the duo flew far ahead of the others, reaching Hardhome and land. They had returned to the lands beyond the wall, to the icy nightmare that threatened to consume mind, body, and soul. It was from here, on the edge of the world, that Darien would need to win others to his cause. No small task. Yet with Sarah and Dreamfire, anything seemed possible now. It should have been expected, yet the lack of opportunities in Hardhome was a setback for the band. There was but one opportunity in the skittering Cove. The chieftain there agreed to house Darien and the band for as long as they could entertain him. Chieftain Gorne was his name. All with tales to tell were cordially invited to enjoy the hospitality of the chieftain. There was the promise of provisions, and the small chance that manpower could be gained from the skittering Cove. It was a short trip, but precautions would be taken, ensuring safe passage for the Dryland band. So from Hardhome they walked, only taking with them what they would need for the journey. Yet not all was pleasant along their path. Darien had started to take note of Harley, avoiding him more than usual. He always sat at the opposite end of the table whenever they were invited to a feast, and constantly refused his company while camping. They may not have had the best of relationships after the killing of the bird at sea, but the attitude was starting to tire Darien, especially once Darien heard him defaming him.
Darien is an evil brampot. I'd be a far better captain than him.
There, beside the fire, Darien spoke. You want to know how it is? I'll show you. The fight was over quickly. Harley defeated. They left him beside a werewood before continuing on. Finally arriving in Gorne's court, it was time to play the part. For a few gifts and decent lodgings, mercenaries such as the Dryland Band could provide entertainment, intelligence, and a suitable distraction for many of the chieftain's courtiers. That is, of course, if Darien and his followers could earn their keep with their tales. It was a task that would take time, yet it gave the band a chance to rest, recover, recuperate. Dreamfire had started to settle somewhat, hunting the wildlife that called the Cove home. Seals, walruses, and lost livestock. The dragon ate well, so too did the band. Darien could sense his snapdragon's frustration, yet she understood the importance of raising a host powerful enough to challenge the father of her ex-husband. Yet their time with Gorne was going well for now.
I've been wondering, my dear Darien,
drawled Chieftain Gorne one idle dinner.
You spin these tall tales of your life and deeds, yet you live 'neath the muddy tent flap, barely sheltered from torrential rain and scorching sun alike.
Darien nods, no use denying that.
With so many of the basic comforts of life denied to you, what's the thing that motivates you to get up in the morning? Why keep marching on the next day when you'll need to do it all again?
Darien thought for a moment. For him, it was clear. It was the life of a knight. Glory, death, and friends made over spilt blood. It wasn't an elegant life, but it was one that he had found meaning in thus far. A harsh life, but a fair life. It was clear that wooing Gorne was going to take far longer than both Darien and Sarah would like. Sometimes you need to cut your losses. Now was that time. They had already spent many months trying to earn his favor. They would not lose any more. And so the journey back to Hardhome was one that they did with heads bowed and failure. Yet not all was lost. Time had passed, and with it, the needs of the chieftains would have changed. There was but one task available. Back in the skittering cove, Chieftain Gorne was seeking wily eyes and ears that could discover some of the personal secrets of Gorne's subjects. It certainly wasn't a lot of gold, but it was yet another chance to earn favor, one that they hoped wouldn't take half a year to complete. They arrived in a cove that was already experiencing conflict. Chieftain Gorne's suspicions lay upon his knight Harmer, and so it was that Darian found himself stalking her through a godswood. She was clearly in deep counsel with herself. Darian chanced a few more steps closer, hiding behind a jutting wall. He could almost hear her whispered words. Whether they were a confession to the old gods or just wild muttering, he couldn't quite make out. Yet Darian wasn't one to hide, and he'd had enough of it. Open threats may succeed where eavesdropping fails. A choice that would pay off. Excellent, excellent. Chieftain Gorne boomed as Darian brought him the news. Harmer, it would seem, was an unbeliever. I had my suspicions, of course, but to have them confirmed. He gestured at a guard to bring forward Darian's pay, stroking his chin, and thought, your reward. Should I need help in the future, do not hesitate to answer my call. Farewell, Captain Darian, with extra coin and provisions in hand, and favor to boot. The job had gone well. Not long after leaving the cove, and as the band traveled through the wildlands of Shelter Bay, Darian found himself with the distinct feeling of being watched. Hiding, though poorly, he could see a frail, dirty girl watching his entourage. A member of the caravan informed Darian. The locals say these lands are haunted by someone they call Ygritte, who is said to have been raised far away from human society by a wolf. Apparently, the poor creature had taken a fascination with humans, and had even begun to speak some basic common, though not to any meaningful proficiency. The girl reminded Darian of a young version of himself, albeit one on the other side of the world. Snow instead of sand. It would not be easy, but he would try to train the girl. Ygritte, the daughter of wolves, joined the Dryland band. The other members did what they could to accommodate her. Food certainly seemed to help, yet only time would tell if the wild child could be tamed. Perhaps it was his time with the chieftain, yet Darian was becoming quite the storyteller. And with Hardhome once again in his sights, he had hopes that the band's numbers could finally start to grow. Yet, the needs of the chieftains here were few and far between. They were far too busy fighting among themselves, and with the band's smaller number, there was little that they could do to help. In what might be his most daring move yet, Darian asked Eldario to plot a course to the wall, to Castle Black. Perhaps they could be of use here. Gaining passage through the wall would not be possible for the whole band, especially for Dreamfire, who seemed more and more restless the closer they got to the wall. Yet a smaller number of them might be able to bribe their way through, to serve the whims, the wills of the Northern Lords. Right now, Darian did not care from where he mustered men, as long as they served his goals. And so it was that the Dryland band arrived on the opposing side of Castle Black, not far from the forests of Whitetree. Here, the opportunities were far more plentiful. Commander Abadolf of the Night's Watch was seeking urgent, discreet swords for hire. He was offering a handsome reward for swift, clean work. It was a short trip to Oakenshield. The needs of Abadolf were simple. There were prickly characters in Oakenshield that he sought to have removed. As per the norm, no serious bloodshed was desired. Young Darian knew just what to do. It was a task that would not take the Dryland band long. The days drifted by as they carried out the commander's whims. For some of the band, They were more than a little glad to be back on this side of the wall, a short reprieve from the terror of the far north. Yet here there was very little comfort from the cold. To the surprise of many in the band, the Night's Watch had it far worse than the free folk they supposedly defended the realm from. It took them little under a month. The band had carried out the will of Abadolf of Oakenshield. For their trouble, they had a small pouch of silver and the favor of a powerful commander. A commander that would carry out quite the request for Darien. A men-at-arms regiment, well-trained troops, for no more than the favor he had earned. 100 armored footmen, well-trained, well-equipped, and hungry. Yet it was exactly what Darien needed. The next opportunity came from Crow's Creek. Chieftain Gorne was suffering from rampant bandits, usurious officials, and panicky peasants. He sought anyone willing to keep them all in line. Chieftain Gorne's marshal visited the band's encampment. As soon as he and Darien were left alone, he began muttering,
"It's embarrassing to admit, but I need your help dealing with the disobedient lowlives of Swill Rock."
The marshal huffed and glowered.
"They flout their chieftain's authority. I can't keep them in control. They'll beat and humiliate anyone I send, daring me to come in at full force. Their conduct is a black mark, one that stains all this realm."
Darien would deal with them. Swill Rock was not far, and as ever, precautions would be taken, with 2 sets of equipment easing their travels. Aldario plotted the best course he could. From White Tree, they crossed into Crow's Creek until they reached the river that divided the 2 tribal holds. There, the winds picked up. Traveling through the unforgiving wilderness that stretches beyond the wall is difficult on a good day. Today, it seems, will not be one of those. The air jabs its way into every gap in Darien's fur and cloak, and the howling gales pummel his senses. The clouds above no doubt carry snow with them, to blind the band as well. With the snow comes wet, and with wet comes freezing. With his family alongside him, shelter was but the only option, and they would need to find it fast. An action that saved lives. As their journey could continue on to Swill Rock, upon arriving, Darien was quick to round up the worst of the rabble-rousers and demand that they explain themselves. Raymond, a peasant of some reputation, spoke for the rest.
"It is our place to be ruled over, but Chieftain Gorne does it unjustly, with chaos rife in the land, while we can hardly hold on to what's ours. Still, he drives us to labor for him like workhorses. We toil without any promise of safety from war, maladies, and the like."
Perhaps at a gentler time, Darien would have heard the man's words, yet they fell upon deaf ears. His goal was absolute. There was but one path forwards. He would perform his task, hoping the threat would carry weight and that bloodshed would be avoided. When the clamorous ordeal of bending each peasant leader to Darien's will was complete, they took to the road once more. Harlow spoke of their next destination. It was a small holding known as Craster's Keep. It was not long before the band needed to take shelter once again. Darien leapt into the dark sanctuary of a cave, just as the first snows started to fling themselves down from the clouds above. The howling of the wind still haunted the band inside, yet the walls of the cave are thick, and they would shelter them from the worst of the cold. As he stepped further into the cave, his eyes adjusting to the darkness that he had no torches to dispel, he was surprised to find paintings waiting for him deeper within the cave, figures of some folk who used this place for shelter before them. While it was true that the fire was warm, his snapdragon, Sarah, was far warmer. The band would need to wait here for some time. Darien was rather content with the fact. With the snows finally past, they continued their grim trek to Craster's Keep. The tale here was much the same as the other, and the outcome would be the same. Darien and his much larger band applied pressure where it was needed. They had excelled at their task, not only gaining more gold, but also gaining the favor of Chieftain Orell, that Darien was eager to take advantage of. The size of his armored footman regiment was now 200 strong. The might of the Dryland band was growing. Returning to his camp, Darien sought to commission a supply tent. It was a task that would take 5 months to gather the necessary materials, yet it would increase the amount of provisions they could carry with them. And now with 200 eager soldiers, every little bit would help. As for opportunities, the next lay in Brokenwood. It was there that the headwoman, Ygritte, had placed a bounty for one that had committed a number of heinous crimes against her. The bounty was for Joramun Redfire, and it was said that he might still be nearby. The band would travel fast to meet him. Leaving the shadow of the wall, it was not long before Sarah fell ill, a rarity for Targaryens. Yet her movements were labored, her breathing was heavy and spontaneous. It was an illness that Darien had seen affect others. He was certain that the cure lay somewhere in his mind, and as it would seem, he was right, nursing Sarah back to health. And in so doing, he became more than just a husband. He became a friend. Back on the track, Brokenwood beckoned, and so too did their bounty. Darien had heard it all before, and while he now had many soldiers at his back, he would not risk losing this Joramun in the woods beyond them. No, to single combat they would go. Yet Joramun Redfire was no normal warrior. Joramun was a berserker. At any moment, that rage could break free. With that in mind, Darien struck out, leaping into action, launching a flurry of thrusting jabs. Joramun pulls back from every blow, letting Darien attack without getting in a solid hit. It would not be long before he would tire. Darien's form was good, with only small errors, while Joramun's was incredible. Darien did the best he could to recall the legends in the spur of the moment, and try to couch his spear as the heroes of old. It was enough for a solid blow against his surprised foe. Joramun retaliated with rapid thumps and crushing thwacks. The two were on equal footing. Finally, Joramun's stance started to fall. While still incredible, Darien could not be more than one well-placed strike away from victory. But the same could be said for the berserker. Spear flying, Darien threw a hail of piercing thrusts at his opponent. Each blow robbed him of something: his stance, the air in his lungs, his sword, chunks of his flesh. It was only when he was almost totally helpless that Darien let his weapon puncture lethally into Joramun's chest. He didn't quite seem to appreciate the mercy, convulsing in feeble spasms as he fell backwards into the spreading pool of his life's blood. Yet another job well done. The open road awaited Darien and the band. Ygritte would be pleased. It was a bout that Darien hoped had earned him more favor. Favor among the folk and the chieftains of this land. They were close to the wall now, yet as they made their way through the thick forest, Darien was overcome by a feeling of being watched. With every passing moment, the rustling of the trees sounded more like whispers, and the anxious expression on the faces of his companions indicated that they too shared his perception. Just then, an unmistakable sound of laughter, high-pitched, as if belonging to a child, reached them from deeper within the forest. Soon, other similarly childish voices joined the chorus of seemingly amused snickering that echoed disturbingly all around them. Darien tried to make out the silhouettes among the trees, yet the forest was too thick. The source of the laughter remained as mysterious as it was unsettling. Surely they were just children, and children were no threat. They would make their camp for the night and let the observers sate their curiosity. The whispers and giggles followed them as they made their way to the first clearing suitable for a campsite. Their efforts to prepare for nightfall was audibly no small source of amusement for the children, as their laughter picked up every time the band started a new task. But by the time they decided to settle in, it died down and gave way to a somewhat more distant sound of singing. Getting their fill of novelty, the children of the forest decided to spend their evening sharing a song, the same way that the band often do. But they did not dare compete, as their singing was far more beautiful than anything any of them had ever heard. As they sat around the fire, Darien heard dewy-eyed Bartimus whisper, "I would give anything to keep listening to that." Darien thought to himself, a gift would go well. His lucky rabbit's paw he carried with him. He hoped these strange beings might appreciate it. As a new day dawned, and the chirping of the morning birds woke Darien from a delightful sleep, he found himself smiling before he even opened his eyes. As he surveyed the campsite, he found his entourage in an apparently similar mood. The children of the forest were nowhere to be heard, but the memory of yesterday's evening lingered on. It was then he noticed the gift that he left on a flat rock on the outskirts of the camp was gone, and in its place, a leather bundle. Unwrapping it revealed a weirwood flute. The sound produced by this simple flute was nothing short of enchanting. The instrument is surprisingly easy to play. Even a novice player like Darien will not find themselves out of finger to hit the next note. It was a gift he would dearly cherish. Once again, in the shadow of Castle Black, Darien had favors to spend. Ygritte would offer troops to his cause. Another 100 armored fighters. Their campsite was quickly growing, and it had the opportunity to grow further as Chieftain Gorne had need of Darien once again. The skittering Cove urgently required swords for hire. The band was becoming rather used to these journeys through the wild woods beyond the wall. They knew the paths to take, the voices to ignore, and the lights in the night to be wary of. The skittering Cove was active as ever, yet an ongoing siege would not hold them back from completing their task. On the 3rd of 4th moon 87 AC, their work was complete. The Garden of Crab-Eater was beautifully, blissfully silent once more. Their work here was done. On their journey back to the wall, yet another had fallen ill. This time it was none other than Darien's maester Clement. He would have but no option to attempt to cure the man himself in the same manner that he did Sarah. Thankfully for Darien, his tinctures worked well again. Upon returning to the wall, Darien received word that the skittering Cove had fallen. While he had earned good coin, he would not be able to exchange any favor for greater arms, as the tribe of Antler River seemed to be gaining more and more power in the region, consolidating tribe after tribe. And while he might not earn favor there was still the Night's Watch. Lord Master Artos sought out the Dryland Band. The bridge of Boar Harrow was unprotected. Darien could fix that problem. The Lord Commander agreed to offer them safe passage, with the bulk of Darien's forces remaining on the northern side of the wall. The band would work as fast as they could, performing a passage of arms for the Night's Watch. 5 of them worked diligently as days turned into weeks and weeks into months. It was both strange and dangerous being back on this side of the wall for as long as they were. The climate, while still harsh, was kinder than what lay beyond. Darien dearly missed his family, but with Dreamfire and his own Snapdragon, they were as safe as they could be. Also, Darien prayed to the gods. It was during this time that the supply tent was finally finished. The total amount of provisions they could carry with them for both the members of the Dryland Band and the army that awaited them on the other side of the wall was far increased. Yet not all of Darien's family was on the far side of the wall. There was his ward, Ygritte, and although nobody dared to dream it, it appeared there had been a breakthrough in her development. Once a simple child cradled by nothing but feral beasts, the girl is at last showing progress. Ygritte speaks in complete sentences and plays with other children her age as if she had always been one of them. Today, after their usual lessons, she even asked Darien to be her father. It was a decision that he was not quick to make, especially without Sarah by his side. For now, though, it was still a triumph. Ygritte, the daughter of wounds, was now a child just like any other, and while not her father, Darien would still care for her. Good news had arrived from Chieftain Gorne of Crow's Creek. A new regiment had been formed for young Darien, the army's numbers now swelling to 400 armored footmen, and their work in Boar Harrow was complete. With 53 coin in pocket, and Lord Master Artos, now a patron of Darien, he hoped to call upon those that wore the black, that they might be able to spare him the strength he needed to save the young child of the dragon in the far north. Like the others, Artos was happy to contribute, but this time with more than just men. They awaited Darien back at Castle Black. They would struggle in the cold, yet the riders and the horses were born of the north. Headwoman Ygritte of Treeling was not so easily swayed. There would need to be an offering, one that Darien was happy to make. It was enough to convince her of Darien's cause, adding another 100 armored footmen to Darien's swelling ranks. There weren't many provisions available at Castle Black, but there was enough to fill their stocks. It was finally time to leave the wall behind. Half of their provisions would take them past the Fist of the First Men to Flowwater Lodge. One Captain Halleck would guide them through the woods. Even with additional mercenary guards and the army following them, the dangers beyond the wall were many, both environmental and otherwise. Yet, it seemed as though the gods blessed this journey too. Reunited with Sarah, his son, and Dreamfire, their travel was swift and without trouble. That was until they reached the Fist of the First Men. One of the servants from Darien's new army had passed away. Death from natural causes was not unheard of on these travels, but it was unfortunate nonetheless, as the servant had become close to Darien. Regardless, he would have to decide what to do with the body of the deceased. It would be improper to just dump their corpse on the side of the road, after all. Even if they are a servant, they could instead take their body back home for a funeral. It was too far to travel back now, but a proper burial was in order. They would remain here upon the Fist of the First Men, under snow and stone. Arriving in Flowwater Lodge, there was corruption nearby, and a chieftain named Gavin who sought to undo it. They would move back through the woods to Shadowskin Lodge. There were rumors of disappearances and dangers in the area, no doubt an element of the unrest. Yet Darien would not waver from his duty. The corruption uncovered and dealt with. It was swift work, and Gavin's favor brought their number of armored footmen to 600, the maximum size they could manage for the regiment. There were further duties and opportunities awaiting them back in Flowwater. Chieftain Gorne was seeking swords for hire, offering gold and provision and favor too. Darien's agents quickly got to work. It would not take them long to perform the tasks the chieftain had set before them. The dryland band was far more adept than the others that roamed these icy hills. But just then, Chieftain Gavin had reached out, seeking the handsome Captain Darien's aid, asking him to join his side in a war, raiding for captives in Forktop, not too far to the south. It was an opportunity unlike any so far to test out the might of his new forces. Darien and his army marched through the forests and across the flats to Fangspear, where Gavin's enemies await. There was no escape for the enemy forces. Crossing a small river, they engaged. The Battle of Fangspear had begun. At first, the fighting was close, but the far better trained and better armed forces of Darien chipped away at the front lines, leaving only the very best. That was before Dreamfire appeared. There was little they could do. It was a slaughter. Darla, the marshal that Darien had worked under for Chieftain Gorne, was captured. 948 of her men had fallen. Only 9 of Darien's shared their fate. Atop Dreamfire, Princess Sarah claimed 44 lives. The Dryland Band, for the first time, had witnessed the full force of a dragon close at hand. Leaving the battlefield behind, Darien was approached by Clement.
Captain Darien, my leader, I have met the most seductive woman here in Fangspear.
Clement stumbled as he addressed Darien.
Her family will not let us marry without paying a sizable dowry, he stuttered. Please help me.
Darien was not one to stand in the way of love. Clement had followed him all the way up here, beyond the wall, for a love of his own. While it was expensive, he was happy to help a friend. And yet another Ygritte in the band? Well, she was in good company. The two married there on that frozen field. As the army of Darien marched towards Forktop, there was a fort to reclaim. It was a siege that would take time, and in that time, Darien returned to Chieftain Ygritte Sundiver. The members of his band had left in Flowwater, had dealt with the chieftain's problems. The coin helped refill the band's coffers after the recent marriage. Word had reached young Darien from the west. Chieftain Gavin, Chieftain Darien, sieged his enemy's fort in Duskrimmer. This war would not last much longer. Sickness and disease had spread throughout Forktop. The fort would not hold for much longer. On the 15th of 6th moon, Forktop was under Gavin's control once again. And to the west, the fortress known as Plunge had nearly fallen to Gavin. But that was far from the best news that Darien received this month. Sarah came to him early one morn, her hand upon her stomach. She was pregnant once more. Shortly after which, young Ygritte came asking Darien for a pet rabbit. She had been asking for a while. He had told her he would get her one in 3 months if she displayed more focus in her studies. She responded that she was fine with her current dedication to her studies, reward or no reward. She was content. Not all had to have the flame of ambition. Some must learn to live with their lot in life. And Ygritte had already achieved so much. All seemed to be going well, except for the news that Chieftain Gavin, for some inexplainable reason, had broken the siege in Plunge. With mere days before they were likely to give in to his demands, he left, returning to Forktop, leaving Darien no choice but to march into Duskrimmer to offer what support he could. Together they reformed the siege, and the motivations of Chieftain Gavin were somewhat clearer. An army had rallied to the west. It was fear that caused the chieftain to flee, yet now with Darien and the dragon, there was little for Gavin to fear. Even so, the fort had restocked. It would be months before it fell. Dragonfire would not break the siege. The small folk within were innocent. Sarah would not fight them. Yet should any challenge them, the Snapdragon was ready. Even at war, favors could still be called in, and Chieftain Gorne owed Darien. A second regiment of armored footmen was provided, and would for now remain unraised in Knuckle Ridge. Then there was the younger Darien. There was no end to the opinions and wants to the son and heir of Darien Dryland. Half the time, he was trying to tell his father what to do, instead of the other way around. Formidable or aggravating, it was a fine line to walk. The younger Dryland was certainly bossy. He therefore would be given a martial education by Darien Sr. The younger's disposition was well suited to the lessons, and while this war had waged on for longer than Darian or Sarah would have liked, it would no doubt bring fear to their enemy in the far north. That verdant valley of the Fens was not safe from Sarah and her dragon. The fire of a dragon was breathed beyond the wall for perhaps the first time in an age, if not ever before. There is an old saying that there is no fury like a woman scorned. What then of a dragon woman? For now, the war of Darien Dryland and his allies continue, hoping that the chieftains of the north will return the favor in kind.